about these so-called vaccine passports lately. Now, the thing is, they don't actually exist here in the U.S., but that hasn't stopped a bunch of politicians from getting everyone all riled up.
It validates in some way the rhetoric or even some of the misinformation that's out there already.
And we've been talking a lot about equity with how vaccines are distributed and who is actually getting the shots. Well, I got to see it in action at a church in North Portland.
So if you're going to talk about, access and equity and inclusion, to me, that speaks of, man, I got to have a choice.
And first, you got a stimulus check, and you were happy. Then, Oregon taxed your stimulus check, and you were mad. Now, lawmakers want to make good. But before you get happy again, let's read the fine print. Here's the story.
You always got to read the fine print. Don't forget about the fine print. I'm Dan Haggerty. The fine print right there in the background. This is the story. Thanks for being with us. All the ways to communicate with us at the bottom of your screen. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Let's start the show, shall we? Big news. Big story. Big story. That's what we call it, right? Good news, actually. And it is good news. There's something new to argue about when it comes to COVID. So for all of you tired of bickering over masks and mandates and lockdowns, we introduce vaccine passports because fighting over Thanksgiving parties is so last season. And just like all of those other topics, you were probably introduced to vaccine passports in a Facebook post shared by your uncle who can't stop saying things like, "Why is it okay to say British variant but not to say China virus?" Because British people aren't being assaulted in the streets, Uncle Steve. But before you go off in the comment sections, let's talk about this latest COVID controversy. Here's Kristen Severance.
Claim number 3.
First, we spent months debunking misinformation about COVID.
We can verify that everything in this post is just not true.
Then masks.
We can verify the claims that masks are causing carbon dioxide poisoning or toxicity are false.
Now it's vaccine passports. Vaccine passports are a digital or paper record showing you've had the COVID vaccine used when traveling. China has one that uses a QR code. A digital version is being used in the EU. Vaccine passports are not being used in the U.S., but international travelers do currently use something called a yellow card to show that they've been immunized against diseases like yellow fever. While President Biden has assembled a task force to look into digital vaccine certificates, he said these would be left to the private sector and the system would not be maintained by the government. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said last week there will be, quote, no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential. Dr. Anthony Fauci said the same thing this week. But misinformation about a federally mandated vaccine passport system persists.
I think the main kind of misinformation we're seeing is a lack of good information.
Daniel Acosta Ramos is an investigative researcher with First Draft, an organization that analyzes and tries to stop misinformation. He said there are several narratives out there about vaccine passports. One, a real lack of context about what they are.
There is something lacking, and it's the fact that vaccine passports has been around for quite some time. I have mine here. It's just a yellow card in which you can have all the vaccinations you can have.
He said the second narrative has to deal with the, quote, end of times.
It's basically a direct connection between this vaccine passport and apocalyptical/religious narrative.
He said the vaccine passport as a start to the end of the world is being spread by QAnon and their supporters, like Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia.
Is this something like Biden's mark of the beast? Because that is really disturbing and not good.
So in both cases, we're seeing that as the misinformation starts in closed spaces and then goes to more public spaces.
And the third narrative is that passports will be federally mandated. Mike Pompeo tweeted, requiring Americans to show a vaccine passport is outrageous and un-American. Republican Senator Rand Paul wrote an op-ed for The Hill with the title, "We must resist the latest COVID-era power grab, the vaccine passport." And Republican governors like Greg Abbott of Texas and Ron DeSantis of Florida are banning vaccine passports in their states.
It validates in some way the rhetoric or even some of the misinformation that's out there already.
Jason Malika teaches social and digital media analytics at American University. He said when politicians ban something that doesn't exist, like a federally mandated passport, it really fuels the misinformation wildfire.
That basically says we're taking the information that someone said that wasn't really necessarily filled with truth and basically said, yep, that's true. And that's where people get confused. But that's also where the line starts to be divided between Republicans, Democrats, or vaxxers, anti-vaxxers, or even governors that feel that it would be good to have these passports if they were ever put into effect or not.
Bottom line, while some private businesses may end up requiring proof of vaccination, there is no federally mandated COVID vaccination passport system in the works.
Okay, Kristen, now while the federal government isn't mandating this, it doesn't mean that no one will ever require you to prove you've been vaccinated.
Right, like a private business or, an event center. Right now in New York State, they have something called the Elixir Pass. It's this voluntary system where you can upload your paperwork and, be able to show an event center or anyone else if they request that you prove that you had the COVID-19, vaccination. The bottom line, our story was talking about this federally mandated system that would be required and maintained by the government. President Biden said that is not in the works and that will not be happening here in the U.S. Do you have a question about vaccine passports or anything else? Just let us know. Use that hashtag, HeyDan.
All right, Kristen, thank you. So what does equity look like? You hear that word a lot. We know what it means, but what does it look like in action? Let me show you. I saw it yesterday. This was inside a Baptist church in North Portland, Mount Olivet. They hosted a pop-up clinic. The church partnered with Providence Health to get 120 vaccines, and Medical Teams International came in to help give those shots. Volunteers from the church helped coordinate the room. It was fantastic. Everybody worked so well together, and you can't really tell through the masks, but people were in really good moods. There was no wait. Most of the people made appointments. Some people did walk in, about 50 or so. They walked in and, they just heard about this from a family member or a friend down the street. They ran down, they got the vaccine, and that was that. Simple. I know that video didn't look all that impressive. It wasn't some huge operation. I mean, Mount Olivet is no convention center. After all, they gave 120 shots out of the roughly 35,000 administered yesterday in the state. But I want to explain why I'm giving these 120 shots some special attention tonight. Actually, I can probably explain it by focusing on just one of those 120 shots. I met this man named Jackie Bowder. He was one of the walk-ins. He was thrilled to be there and to get the shot. He grew up in this neighborhood. He got baptized in that church. And yesterday he felt like he hit the lottery because while Jackie has been eligible for a month now, he had all but given up trying to get the vaccine.
Well, what I want to say is this right here, I'm old school, I'm 65, right? I truly don't own a computer, I got my phone, but you know what I'm saying? I truly don't have a computer set up in my place. I don't. And things has been so terrible for me because, my age, I'm 65. I should have been had the shot, if I could have gotten it. But, everything is, booked all the time. I just wasn't on time. Just my timing was bad, apparently.
His timing wasn't bad. Timing has nothing to do with it. The deck is stacked against Jackie. He's on horseback racing against Ferraris. There are people with high-speed internet and MacBook Pros who still can't book an appointment when these online windows open up. I get emails from people complaining in Forest Park. How do you think they're doing in Kenton? In Jackie's neighborhood, poverty is a real problem. Is a real big problem. And that problem spreads its tentacles into every aspect of your life, including getting a vaccine that shouldn't care what's in your bank account. And in that neighborhood, there are more black people than most other neighborhoods in Portland, and they need support. Here's how the executive pastor, Pastor Ed, explained it to me.
Feel very, very relieved, very excited to have the opportunity, the choice. So if you're going to talk about, access and equity and inclusion, to me, that speaks of, I got to have a choice, number one. Number two, I ought to have a place where I can come where I'm comfortable. Number three, I ought to be able to come to a place that is stable. And what I mean by that, a place where folks can get this vaccine again and again and again. So our partnership with Providence and with Medical Teams International doesn't end today. Today is just the beginning.
So Mount Olivet had another clinic today. Of course, I was talking to him yesterday, so there's 2 days in a row. Another 120 shots today. They have another one planned for this weekend and several more next week. 120 doses at a time. You see, Pastor Ed, I like Pastor Ed. He kind of impressed me. He's a smart guy, and he really knows his community. When they first kind of came up with this idea to do it there, the organizers with the hospital wanted to do one of those huge one-day clinics, get everybody into the church and let's vaccinate the community kind of thing. And Pastor Ed said, you know what? I don't think that's the best way to do it. I don't think that's the best way to get to the people who are the hardest to reach. Maybe some of the people who are reluctant to get this vaccine. Instead, let's do it this way, where we have these waves of 120 people coming in and then going back into the community and spreading the news like gospel, you could say. Word of mouth from the mouths they trust.
A person might need to just really think about it, you know, a time again. I mean, just that one thought sometime, it probably can go top of your head, go across, you know, you miss it. I mean, I miss stuff all the time. And I'm happy that I have family and friends that will talk to me and give me the right information that we need, because sometimes you need to hear it more than once. That's all that is, you know what I mean? I mean, from my perspective.
Now, there are several churches in our area doing this work. They're partnering with hospitals and organizations like Medical Teams International. In fact, they are doing a new partnership with Kaiser to expand this work next month. So if you think your church community would be a good host for a clinic like this, let me know. I'll connect you with them, or reach out directly to Medical Teams International. All right. Let's count some vaccines, shall we? More than 1.37 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose. So that's where we're at right now. The majority of these people have gotten their second dose as well. So we're about 32.5% of the state's population now with that first shot. In Washington, more than 2.6 million people have gotten at least their first dose, which works out to be about 34% of Washington's population. I'd like to revisit now a question that I got from Jen a couple of months ago. Hey, Dan, is Oregon taxing the stimulus payments? A shocker to us, as I'm sure it will be to most people. So, yes, they are. I mean, at least for now anyway. When you do your taxes, you'll probably notice that some extra money came out to the state, or maybe you're going to see a smaller refund than you're used to getting. And here's why. See, in Oregon, when we pay federal taxes, we can actually deduct that amount from our state taxes. It's really a nice perk. Only a few states really let you do that. And it usually saves people a couple of bucks in state taxes. But here's where it gets confusing. The stimulus payments are technically an advance payment of a federal income tax credit. So that means that your federal tax liability goes down, and so does the amount that you can subtract from your Oregon taxes. And right now you just said, huh? Unless you're a CPA, and then you went, yes, exactly. Good job, Dan. Oregon actually did this same thing with the 2008 stimulus checks, if you can remember back that far. It feels like 1,000 years ago. Long story short, a lot of people are discovering that they owe the state more than they expected. And here's the thing, you might be getting that money back if a bill goes through the legislature. A proposed amendment to House Bill 2433 would force the Department of Revenue to give everyone a refund on the tax that they took from the stimulus checks. Then again, if it does pass, this new law won't take effect until the end of September. So if you get the money back, you're going to be waiting a little while to get it back. Kind of reminds me of the whole waiting week debacle with unemployment checks, everybody kind of having to wait months and months, but it happened. It happened eventually. Anyway, the bill's in the House Revenue Committee right now. We'll keep you posted on where it goes from there.
Portland just passed a $6 million plan to tackle gun violence, and none of that money is going to police, which has a lot of you asking, wait, what? And the Rose Festival is going to be pretty scaled down again this year. So why don't we take a look back in the KGW vault at when the city went all out, when the story continues.
Welcome back. I was just going through some emails and some tweets. Keep them coming using that hashtag #HeyDan. Tell us what you think about the show, what you'd like to see us cover, that sort of thing. You can also message me on Instagram or message the story on Instagram at @TheStoryKGW. Now, suffice it to say, our inbox has been flooded with questions about this next topic. Portland's $6 million plan to tackle gun violence. The City Council approved the plan yesterday. The exact price tag is $5.9 million, and most of it, about $4 million, goes toward community groups and nonprofits, people already working with neighborhoods that have been hit hard by this violence. More than $1 million will go toward hiring 24 unarmed park rangers to patrol Portland's parks around the clock. All that said, none of that money, not one penny of that money, will go toward police. No surprise, a lot of you have questions on this, so we took them to Maggie Vespa for answers.
Between the story inbox and our chat on Sunrise Extra, we got a ton of questions about Portland's plan to tackle gun violence. So let's dive right in. Scott's question is sure to grab some attention. He asked, oddly enough, it seems I have not heard of many shootings occurring in parks. Can you tell us the percentage? We sent this to the Portland Police Public Information Team, and we got a response within minutes. Lieutenant Greg Pashley wrote, quote, from July 1st, 2020 through March 28th, 2021, approximately 2.84% of shooting incidents in Portland occurred in parks. Put another way, he wrote, there were approximately 917 shooting incidents during that time period. Approximately 26 took place in a park. Less than 3%. Now, just to make sure you have as much context as possible, I responded and asked police if maybe shootings happened near parks, like across the street, and just weren't recorded in their system as being in a park. We also asked perhaps if some started with a conflict in a park and then traveled elsewhere, and that's where shots were actually fired. Police didn't have that context. So that in mind, we sent that stat over to every city commissioner and the mayor's office. And we asked, if less than 3% of shootings since last summer have happened in parks, why is the city putting more than $1 million into hiring park rangers to combat gun violence? Especially given that Wednesday, the chief of police said the bureau is stretched way too thin and officers are overwhelmed with these shootings. And we got a statement back from Parks Commissioner Carmen Rubio's office. It said, quote, the core goal of this plan was to direct resources so as to prevent situations from escalating to shootings. Parks are a key social space for our community. Rangers provide a helpful and reassuring presence and again can catch situations before they escalate to greater violence. And Wednesday, the mayor stressed that while no new money is going toward police, there will be a restructuring of the bureau to put more officers on gun violence wherever shootings occur.
For example, last month, we stood up the enhanced community safety team. That was 12 investigators, 10 officers, 3 sergeants, some analyst support. All of that is now focused 24/7 on investigative capacity for gun violence specifically. And what we've also proposed in the police bureau is the focused intervention team. That will be 12 officers and 2 sergeants who will be fundamentally focused on breaking the cycle.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
So, this week, we explained how Portland became the City of Roses, a story that dates back to the 1800s. It's a tradition that we celebrate every year by recognizing some of the most outstanding young women in Portland, Rose Festival princesses. The festival, it's usually a big deal, right? It typically tackles the town. Every year it's done this except for 3 years, World War I, World War II, and World War COVID. Well, this year it's back. Kinda. I mean, I'll be honest, it's lacking a little bit of the usual fanfare.
The 2021 Lincoln Rose Festival Princess is Gina Lim. Yay!
Yay, come on. We could do better than that, can't we? Gina deserves something better than that, something grander, something royal, shall we?
The 2021 Lincoln Rose Festival Princess is Gina Lim.
Better. Much better. Not perfect, but better. Nothing really quite beats the real thing, which brings me to an email that we got from Joan. Joan said, I remember back in the 50s when the Rose Festival princesses were everywhere. In downtown, they had photos of all the princesses in store windows. They all wore identical outfits donated by some of the major stores, M&F, Littman's, etc. Is there anything in the vault on the princesses in the 50s? Well, we looked around in our archives and we found a clip from the Rose Festival princesses in 1956. We also found a bunch of old footage going back to the 1920s. Here's a look.
Queen's float. On it, Queen Sharon with the princesses. We feel that the floats in the Portland Rose Festival Parade are something that you will thrill to as each one of them passes by. Decorated with thousands upon thousands of living flowers. Moving on down the street and out of sight.
Looking now upon the officials as they pass in review, Mayor Terry Schrunk and his family getting a rousing hand from the crowd. Followed by a precision marching band, men in blue, visitors for our Rose Festival festivities. The theme of the astronauts is much in evidence in this Junior Rose Festival Parade, of course, with McNiven and White. White, his famous spacewalk of 20 minutes. And there's the capsule that put him there, the United States and the Gemini 4.
Sending suggestions for the KGW Vault. Use that hashtag HeyDan. We always love digging around down there looking for fun stuff to cover. So in the meantime, I'm going to be reading some of your comments when we finish this little thing next. Some people are wondering if I was in the band after my little marching demonstration there. I was not in the band. No, I'm not really a two things at once kind of guy. I mean, I could probably try and play an instrument. I can march. Put those two together. No way. Right on my face. So Vern wrote in after I told the story earlier of a church in North Portland giving vaccines to its church community and the surrounding community there. And he said, hey, Dan. Vern said, hey, Dan, I'm sick and tired of the media claiming that poverty is only a minority affliction. Poverty doesn't care what color you are, so please stop it. What are you talking about? When have you ever seen the news in your whole life say that poverty is a minority affliction? When have you ever heard that? Sometimes people conflate issues and they just miss the whole point. So if you want to talk more about it, Vern, I'm getting a little riled up right now. I'll message you, we'll chat about it and see if we can work this out. In the meantime, that's the story. I'll see you at the end of the week tomorrow.